Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with my Books Beside My Bed video for the week of June 24th to June 30th. So the last week of June, and I had a pretty spectacular reading week this week. I read 5 books and 2 novellas. So that was a total of 2,324 pages, and I am up to 116 books for the year. I also managed to start one of my tome topple books this week, which was also pretty exciting as well. So the next 2 weekly wrap-ups are probably going to be primarily tome topple wrap-ups, so stay tuned for that. So the first 2 things that I read this week were novellas in the same series. So the first one was All Systems Red and then Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. These are books 1 and 2 in the Murderbot Diaries, and I love that series name. All Systems Red was published in 2017. Artificial Condition was published this year, both published by Tor, and I gave them both 5 out of 5 stars. The Murderbot series follows a security cyborg who dubs itself Murderbot, and this cyborg has hacked its own system. It essentially can think for itself now, but it enjoys working in security and protecting the humans that it's assigned to, even if it doesn't particularly like interacting with the humans. And so there's a really lovely character element where you can really see the personality of this cyborg that just doesn't want to interact with humans. It just wants to sit there and stream and binge watch space dramas, and it's fabulous. All Systems Red is obviously the first book where we are introduced to the character, as it is guarding a research team on a planet, and when that team loses contact with a second research team on the planet, they decide to investigate, and basically all hell breaks loose. Artificial Condition follows on from that story almost immediately after the events of the first book conclude. Great series, highly recommend it. They're only 156 pages each, so easy read. And the next 2 books are coming out this year, and I'm so excited. And because I was having a real sci-fi week this week, the next book that I read was Old Man's War by John Scalzi, which is the first book in this series, I believe. It was originally published in 2005 by Tor, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. It is a version of Earth where once you turn 75, you can choose to enlist in the Colonial Defense Forces, at which point you will leave Earth forever, you will not come back, and you will be taken off to join this army where they're said to make your body better and stronger so that you can fight in this ongoing intergalactic war. And it's a real mystery. No one on Earth really knows what happens because no one has ever returned from the war, because they've either died or they're retired and from the Defense Forces, and they are no longer permitted to return to Earth anyway. So it's a really interesting, complex look at military science fiction. And you're not given a huge amount of context for the war that's going on, just that it's ongoing. This is really the story of the soldiers who leave Earth and then join the Defense Forces. And it's interesting because all of these soldiers have lived a full life. So they've all got life experiences. And so they bring to their service not necessarily the enthusiasm of youth mixed with inexperience, but an experienced worldview. And that can both be a blessing and a hindrance at times, and it was just really interesting, so I do highly recommend this one. Then I read Teacher by Gabby Stroud. This was sent to me for review from Allen and Unwin. It is a 2018 release, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This is a memoir, I would say, and it is about Gabby's experiences as a teacher in Australia, and as such, this was quite a interesting read for me because I am a teacher in Australia and I do teach in the government sector like Gabby did. And really, this is how the constant changing political situation and the pressures on teachers in Australia led to her leaving the profession. I started reading this on a day where I'd had a particularly bad day at work, and I actually had to put it down because everything that she was talking about in this book I was feeling, so I actually had to put it down because I was not in a good headspace to read the book. I was able to pick it up the next day, and I actually really enjoyed the read because, yes, there's a lot of things in here that I agree with, and I think there would be very few Australian teachers out there who would find anything to disagree about this. It's not saying that teaching isn't a wonderful profession, because the idea of teaching kids is really wonderful, but it is all the political stuff and the stuff that goes on in the background that can be really challenging for teachers. Unfortunately, that's usually the stuff that the media like to splash around. It's quite confronting. If you're a teacher, it's probably worth a read if you are interested in memoirs and interested in that discussion around, you know, how much is too much and what are the pressures of teaching and how do teachers interact with one another. which is actually probably one of the more positive things because I think teachers do interact really, really well. But it is that political curriculum side that can really be stifling. So this was a really interesting read and I'm glad that I read it. Then I read The Lost World by Michael Crichton. This was one of my rereads for the 3 Loved Reread Challenge, so it was the final book to read, and again continuing my science fiction kick. This was originally published in 1995 by Century and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I'd forgotten how much I love this book. I had remembered that this was a really slow book to get started, and it is quite slow, but there are so many wonderful things that happen in it that I can forgive that so easily. It's not even a question. So this is the second book in Michael Crichton's Jurassic World series, so it's a sequel, and I didn't bother rereading Jurassic Park because this one was the one that I had always loved. This book follows Ian Malcolm as he is drawn back into John Hammond's genetically re-engineered dinosaurs. So it takes place quite a few years after the events of Jurassic Park, and he's recovered from his injuries and he's back to his research and studies, and he's approached by a man named Levine, who is obsessed with these appearances of unknown dead lizards on islands off the coast of Costa Rica. Levine puts together an expedition, convinces Malcolm to join in, along with Sarah Harding, who is a former colleague and lover of Ian Malcolm's, and also a guy named Thorne who puts together field packs and things for researchers. They end up having to go off and rescue Levine, who has decided to go ahead of them without any equipment, obviously, because what would it be without some drama? And of course, you've got 2 kids who stow away in the equipment and end up on the island with them. So there's this really motley crew of people on this island with dinosaurs on an island that shouldn't exist. And it is really, really interesting, all the maths and science concepts that Michael Crichton goes into in this book, and I found that really, really fascinating a second time round. I'm not really a math science person, but I really love reading about that sort of stuff. I actually intellectually love it. I'm just not very good at applying it personally. So it was really great to read this and to see that I loved it just as much before, and I love the fact that there is a really strong female character in Sarah Harding in this book, who is incredible and capable, and it was just wonderful. So yes, 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read We See the Stars by Kate Van Hooft. This was a review copy sent to me by Allen and Unwin, so thank you very much to them. It was published this month and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. This book was really an interesting read. I kind of struggled to remember the details. Now, I enjoyed it while I read it and I was compelled to keep reading, but the details are a little bit fuzzy. So the story follows Simon, who is an 11-year-old boy. He's in year 6 at school and he is a selective mute. And there are possibly some other things going on in the background, and I won't speculate on what they are. I'm not a doctor and I'm not entirely sure what the author intended for this character, but his behavior and the way he interacts with the world is very different. Everyone thinks he's weird, including his friends, his family, but one day his new teacher, Mrs. Hillcrome, pairs him up with another girl who's a bit of an outsider at school, and the two strike up an unlikely friendship. And at the same time, Simon is beginning to trust his new teacher, who tries her best to deal with the situation she's faced with Simon, who is a very different child to everyone else in the class. Then Mrs. Hillcombe goes missing, and Simon believes that he's the only one who can help her, because in a conversation they had, she told him something that she's never told anyone else, and he promised never to tell them. So he feels it's his duty to go and try and find her. This is historical fiction-ish because it's not set in the present day, and thus sort of the language that people use when talking about Simon can be quite confronting, and you have to go into that aware of it because they see him as being other and they're not afraid to say it, including the adults. So there's some really questionable things going on in here. It was intriguing, and I actually quite liked the way that it ended, especially the last couple of pages, but it just felt like it meandered a little bit, and I wish it had been just a little bit tighter. But you know, it's not necessarily a bad read, it's just probably not necessarily the right book for me. And the last book that I read this week was The Amber Spyglass by Phillip Pullman. This is the third and final book in the His Dark Materials series. It was originally published in 2000 by Scholastic, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I love this series. I listened to the audio again with this book, and I stayed up to 1:30 in the morning listening to it because I just didn't want to stop before the book finished. I obviously can't say too much about it. It is the third book in the series, and I know it's been out forever, but I don't feel that this is something that I want to spoil for anyone. What I can say is that rereading these books has prompted me to consider where all of my interests in reading, my love of angel stories and some of the mythology, and the fact that I really enjoy reading stories and critiques that deal with religion. A lot of stuff came up that I'm sitting going, I wonder if this series is where all that that interest was sparked, because I read these so long ago. I don't know when I picked up these interests in reading, and yet I have them, and I'm wondering whether it came from this series. I love the characters. I loved the relationship between Lyra and Will. It's easy to forget that these characters are 12 and 13 years old in this book. What happens is an adventure, and it's exciting and it's heartbreaking, and there are parts that are just slow burn, and you just build this massive world, and I absolutely loved it. So this one is definitely slower than the other two, and it is longer, but it is so worth it to get to the end. I adore this series. So those are the books that I read this week. In the comments below, let me know what you have been reading this week. What was your favorite read? Are you participating in Tome Topple? Let me know in the comments down below. I am going to start book 2. I'm going to start book 2 this weekend, and I'm, really excited. Oh, I forgot to say, The Amber Spyglass was the first book for Tome Topple. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.